Most people make the mistake of thinking they need to feel motivated before they act. But let me tell you something that will completely shift the way you see motivation. It doesn't work that way. You don't wait for motivation to knock on your door, because it never does. Motivation isn't a spark that suddenly lights up your life. It's a byproduct of action. The moment you take even the smallest step, getting out of bed on time, lacing up your shoes for a workout, opening that book you've been avoiding, your brain releases momentum. That momentum fuels you, and suddenly you feel motivated. But notice the order. First you act, then you feel it. The mistake is thinking you have to feel it before you act. That's why so many people stay stuck in the same cycle for years, waiting for the perfect mood, waiting for the right energy, waiting for that inspired moment that never comes. If you can grasp this one truth, that motivation is not a feeling, it's a habit, you will stop being a prisoner of procrastination and start being the architect of your own drive. Your brain was never designed to make you successful. It was designed to keep you safe. That's why every time you want to step out of your comfort zone, there's resistance. You feel hesitation, excuses flood your mind, and suddenly you start negotiating with yourself. That's your brain protecting you, because comfort feels like survival. But here's the problem: success never lives in comfort. Growth is always uncomfortable. Think about it. Building muscle hurts. Learning something new feels frustrating. Facing your fears makes you anxious. Yet those exact feelings are proof that you're moving in the right direction. If you listen to your brain's default setting, you'll always choose the easy path, the path that feels safe. But if you train yourself to lean into discomfort, to see it as a signal of growth instead of danger, then your psychology shifts completely. You stop chasing comfort and start chasing progress, and that's where real self-motivation begins to take root. Every single choice you make is like casting a vote in your own psychology. Skip the workout today. That's a vote for being someone who quits. Push through it even when you're tired. That's a vote for being someone who shows up no matter what. These small actions may feel insignificant in the moment, but your brain is keeping score. Over time, it starts to form an identity based on the patterns you repeat. This is why people either spiral downward into procrastination or rise upward into unstoppable momentum. It's never about one big decision, it's about the accumulation of small ones. Each action is like training your subconscious to either doubt you or trust you, and the more you stack up those positive votes, the stronger your internal belief system becomes. Eventually, your brain starts to say, I know this person. This is someone who follows through. That's how self-motivation is built, not in giant leaps, but in the quiet discipline of everyday choices. Here's something most people don't realize: your identity is the foundation of your motivation. You can't say, I want to be healthy, while deep down you still see yourself as someone who always skips workouts, eats poorly, or gives up when it gets hard. Your brain will always align your actions with who you believe you are. If you see yourself as lazy, you'll act lazy. If you see yourself as disciplined, you'll find ways to prove it true. This is why so many people start strong but fail. They're trying to change their behavior without changing their identity. The real shift happens when you tell yourself, I am the kind of person who takes care of my health. I am the kind of person who follows through. I am the kind of person who doesn't quit. When you own that identity, every action you take reinforces it. And soon you're no longer forcing yourself to stay motivated. It becomes natural, because you're simply acting in alignment with who you already believe you are. Willpower is weak. It fades, it drains, and it can vanish in an instant. That's why relying on willpower to stay motivated almost always fails. What really keeps you going is momentum. Think about it. The hardest part of running isn't the 10th mile, it's tying your shoes and stepping out the door. Once you start, something shifts inside you. The brain rewards you with a sense of progress, and suddenly the resistance that felt so heavy begins to fade. Momentum takes over. It's like pushing a heavy rock. At first it feels impossible, but once it starts rolling, keeping it moving becomes effortless. That's how motivation works. It's not about forcing yourself with sheer willpower every single day. It's about starting, because starting creates movement, and movement creates energy. The secret is to shrink the first step so small that your brain can't resist doing it. Once you're in motion, motivation shows up naturally, and momentum carries you further than willpower ever could. The real power of motivation comes from consistency, because every time you do what you said you were going to do, you cast another vote for self-trust. And that self-trust is priceless. Think about it. How many times have you broken promises to yourself? You said you'd wake up early, you didn't. You said you'd eat clean, you didn't. You said you'd start that project, and it's still sitting there untouched. Each time, your brain takes note, and little by little, you stop believing your own words. That's why most people struggle with motivation. They don't trust themselves anymore. But the moment you start keeping those promises, even in small ways, your psychology begins to rebuild. You wake up when you said you would, your brain records it. You follow through on that workout, your brain records it. Slowly, you begin to trust yourself again, and that self-trust becomes fuel. Because when you know you'll show up no matter what, motivation isn't something you chase, it becomes who you are. Here's something powerful: if your motivation depends only on external rewards, it will eventually collapse. Think about it. You might start exercising to impress someone, or you might work harder just for the praise, but the moment those rewards disappear, so does your drive. That's why so many people give up when the applause stops or when the scale doesn't move fast enough. External rewards are temporary, but internal rewards last. When you start finding pride in progress itself, when you start valuing the feeling of becoming stronger, sharper, more disciplined, that's when motivation becomes unshakable. Because no one can take that away from you. Your body changes, your mindset shifts, and your confidence grows, and those inner rewards become addictive in the best way. You no longer move for recognition. You move because you love who you're becoming. That's the difference between motivation that fades and motivation that compounds over time. Motivation isn't some gift that only a few lucky people are born with. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be trained. The more you practice it, the stronger it gets. People often look at someone who's disciplined and think they're just different, they're naturally motivated, but that's not true. What they've done is condition their mind through repetition, just like building a muscle in the gym. At first, it's hard, you fight resistance every single day, but as you keep showing up, it gets easier, not because life suddenly changes, but because your psychology adapts. Your brain learns that taking action is the default, not procrastination. That's when motivation stops being this occasional spark and starts becoming second nature. And the best part is, anyone can train this. If you treat motivation as a skill instead of a mystery, you realize you don't have to wait for it. You can build it, strengthen it, and make it automatic. One of the biggest reasons people lose motivation is because they don't have clarity. If you don't know why you're doing something, your brain will constantly look for an escape. It will say, "Why bother? What's the point?" But the moment your mind locks onto a clear purpose, everything changes. Clarity gives direction, and direction creates energy. Think about how different it feels when you say, "I should work out," versus when you say, "I want to be healthy so I can play with my kids, so I can live longer, so I can feel confident in my own skin." That why gives your brain a reason to push through discomfort. Without it, the smallest obstacle feels overwhelming. With it, obstacles become challenges you're willing to face. When you're clear on your purpose, motivation doesn't just appear, it multiplies because your brain finally knows what it's fighting for. When your identity, your habits, and your actions are out of sync, it feels like you're fighting yourself every single day. You say you want to get fit, but your actions don't reflect it. You say you want success, but your habits tell a completely different story. That's why so many people feel drained and frustrated, not because they aren't capable, but because they're constantly living in conflict with themselves. And conflict drains energy. Think about how exhausting it feels to say one thing and do another. You want progress, but your choices reflect comfort. You want transformation, but your routines scream familiarity. Your brain isn't confused, you are. Because deep down, your subconscious is aligning with what you do daily, not what you wish for occasionally. The truth is, motivation becomes effortless when your identity, your habits, and your actions all lock together in harmony. This alignment creates a powerful internal force that no amount of external distraction can shake. You don't need to hype yourself up. You don't need constant reminders. You don't even need endless willpower. Why? Because your daily life naturally flows in the direction of who you believe you are. Let me give you an example. Imagine two people trying to quit smoking. One says, "I'm trying to quit." The other says, "I don't smoke." Both of them might be in the same stage of leaving cigarettes, but the identity is completely different. The first person is fighting a constant battle, needing willpower to resist. The second person doesn't need to resist because their identity has already shifted. It's no longer aligned with smoking. That's the power of identity in action. When who you are matches what you do, the struggle disappears. And this goes beyond habits. It seeps into every corner of your life. If you say, "I want to get healthy," but your identity is still tied to unhealthy choices, you will always feel resistance. You'll always need to force yourself into action. But if you start telling yourself, "I am the kind of person who values health. I am someone who takes care of my body. I am someone who doesn't break promises to myself," then even small choices like choosing water instead of soda, like walking instead of scrolling, become natural. You're not fighting your brain anymore, you're aligning with it. That's why so many people fail to stay motivated. They try to change the action without changing the identity. They force themselves into a new workout plan, but deep down still believe they're lazy. They try to wake up earlier, but still identify as someone who hates mornings, and eventually the identity wins. Because the mind will always fight to prove your self-image right. If you say, "I'm lazy," you'll subconsciously create evidence to support it. If you say, "I'm disciplined," your brain will look for ways to back it up. This is why alignment is so critical, because your psychology is constantly searching for proof of who you believe you are. Now, let's talk about habits, because they're the bridge between identity and action. Habits are the automatic choices you repeat so often, they no longer require much thought. And here's the thing, your habits are a reflection of your identity. Someone who sees themselves as a runner doesn't have to fight to go jogging, they naturally put on the shoes because that's who they are. Someone who identifies as healthy doesn't need to battle cravings every time. They naturally lean toward the choices that match their identity. But this isn't magic, this is psychology. The habit loop starts small. One action repeated often enough becomes normal, and normal eventually becomes identity. Think of it like a thermostat. If your identity is set at lazy, no matter how hard you push, you'll keep snapping back to laziness. But if you raise your internal thermostat, your identity, to disciplined, your brain begins to regulate your actions to maintain that level. That's why someone who has truly shifted their identity doesn't fear losing motivation. It's built into their system. In actions are simply the visible proof of your identity and habits. You can't hide them. You can say you're motivated all you want, but your actions will tell the truth. Every choice is evidence, either reinforcing the old identity or building the new one. And this is where most people fail. They think big changes require big leaps, when in reality, the most powerful transformations come from aligning small, consistent actions with the identity that you want to embody. For example, let's say you want to become more disciplined. You don't need to climb a mountain tomorrow. You just need to start by doing one thing you said you'd do, wake up at the time you promised, complete the task you said you would. That action might feel small, but it's proof, and that proof reinforces your identity as someone who follows through. The more evidence you gather, the stronger the alignment becomes, and soon you don't have to force discipline, you are disciplined. But here's the catch: alignment isn't about perfection, it's about direction. Too many people quit because they mess up once and think they've failed. But failure isn't the end. It's feedback. If your actions slip, it doesn't erase your identity. It simply means you need to realign. The brain isn't asking for perfection, it's asking for consistency. And consistency doesn't mean never falling, it means always coming back. That's how true self-motivation is sustained, not in a single massive effort, but in thousands of small realignments. And let me make this very clear: this alignment of identity, habits, and actions doesn't just make motivation easier, it makes success inevitable. Think about it. If every thought you have, every habit you repeat, and every action you take all reinforce the same direction, how can you not reach your goal? It might take time, it might take effort, but the outcome is guaranteed because your entire psychology is moving in one unified flow. This is why people who are deeply aligned don't burn out the same way others do. They don't wake up each day needing to talk themselves into progress. Their identity already drives their habits, and their habits drive their actions. It's a self-sustaining loop. Motivation doesn't have to be forced because it's embedded in the way they live. They've created harmony between who they are and what they do. And when you reach that level, motivation is no longer even the right word. It's simply your natural state. Let me put it like this. Imagine pushing a heavy car uphill every single day. That's what misalignment feels like. You against yourself, constantly struggling. But once your identity, habits, and actions align, it's like turning the car around and rolling downhill. The same car, the same effort, but now gravity is working with you instead of against you. That's what motivation feels like when it's aligned, effortless momentum. And here's the deeper truth: alignment doesn't just create success, it creates peace. Because when you're living in alignment, you're no longer at war with yourself. You're not battling guilt every night, telling yourself you should have done more. You're not stuck in cycles of self-sabotage. You're not faking motivation for the world while secretly feeling empty inside. Instead, you're congruent. What you say, what you believe, and what you do all match, and that congruence creates confidence. Not the kind of fake confidence that depends on achievements, but real confidence, the kind that comes from knowing you're living as the person you were meant to be. So, the ultimate psychology of self-motivation isn't about chasing external rewards or waiting for inspiration to strike. It's about creating deep alignment between your identity, your habits, and your actions. Once that alignment locks in, you don't need constant reminders. You don't need to fight procrastination every day. You don't need to force yourself into growth. Because your psychology has already made the decision for you. This is who I am, this is how I live, and this is where I'm going. And when you reach that point, self-motivation stops being something you look for and starts being something you are. So, in the end, self-motivation isn't about waiting for some spark to appear or hoping the right mood will push you forward. It's about understanding how your mind works, how your choices shape your identity, and how momentum builds from consistent action. When you stop chasing comfort and start chasing progress, when you align your habits with the person you want to become, you no longer fight to stay motivated. Your life itself becomes the proof of your drive, and that's the moment you realize motivation isn't something outside of you. It's something you've been able to create within you all along.